For some reason, I found myself cataloging my entire Pokemon card collection, or at least the things that are worth something, especially from the first set, the first generation of cards, and the third generation of cards. Those were kind of my peak times. The one when I was when I was in middle school, collecting these things, and the time period when I was in college, playing these card games and collecting them again. Shocked to find they were worth a decent amount of money later on, so if we ever run into financial trouble, I'll know what I'll be hawking at on eBay or whatever. It's not going to come to that, but it is an entertaining thought. And it kind of made me nostalgic for an era in the card game that is long past, specifically the first generation of the card game. The base set, the fossil set, the jungle set. I know I said that in wrong order. That era. So I decided, hey, I should play the Pokemon TCG video game for Game Boy Advance. So I did. It was fun. I played it on a regular Game Boy Advance, the one that's dark as hell, and you need to be in a well-lit room, and the wall adapter. Essentially, I don't know if you've ever seen this thing, but essentially connects to a wall socket and then like replaces the two batteries in the end of the Game Boy Advance. It's because I'm not spending a whole bunch of money on batteries or recharging a whole bunch of batteries in order to do it. I have this adapter, may as well do it. Part of it's broken off, so sometimes when you're playing it, it's a very, very nerve-wracking experience because you got to make sure that battery pack holds in. But I did it. This card game, this video game, I really wish they would have continued on with this forward in time. I think there would have been a market for it, but I'm sure at a certain point they just wanted people to play their app games and their free-to-play games and spend money that way. Fine, sure, but I think there would have been a market for a one-player, story-driven card game that's exactly like, or almost exactly like what is there in paper. I thought it would have been fun. So, playing this brought back a lot of memories. I didn't complete it. I played up to a certain point. It's definitely one of those games where, honestly, Pokemon is kind of like this too, where the first part of the game feels harder because you have less options. Once you get to the midpoint of the game and you've got these booster packs and Pokemon cards and the good items and all that, it gets a little bit easier. But it did remind me how weird that first gen was. Like, when I was a kid, I didn't understand the meta or what was good or whatever. I was just like, play the Pokemon cards I like, play enough items to get by, don't worry about it. And that's not what the competitive meta was at all. I don't remember the website. I might list it in the comments, but there's somebody that was very big into Pokemon trading card game and kind of wrote up all these eras of the Pokemon game, including some of my favorite eras and well beyond that. It has a lot of information and revealed a lot of things about that time period. I didn't understand that the first few sets of the Pokemon card game were all about like big basics. Evolving Pokemon was not a good idea. It took too long. You wanted a big basic that could knock out stuff quickly. You wanted to abuse item cards that were disruptive to everyone else, and you wanted to play your Professor Oak card in order to draw as many things as possible as fast as possible. Those ideas very much reflected in my experience playing this game. I still built my decks more around Stage 1 and Stage 2 Pokemon, certainly. Like, you get to pick a deck at the beginning and you get that card. Cool. I'm definitely going to build around a Blastoise if I have a Blastoise. But those big basics are really good. I definitely used Hitmonchan cards when I could. I definitely used things like Lickitung. Like, all of these things end up being the big successful basics in the actual card game work pretty darn well in the video game version of that. And a lot of those really good item cards were also really important. It was really important to have those bills and draw as fast as possible. It was really important to use that Professor Oak. And in fact, a lot of the time, basically as soon as I could, more Professor Oaks, more bills in order to draw cards. Energy searches were important if you're using two different energy Pokemon, two different types of energy Pokemon, and I usually was just with the things that were available to you at the start, and the fact that the gyms try to counter your obvious strategy with something else. So all those things were reflected in the game. I did get to a point where it seems like I had most of the Pokemon cards, so I probably could have kept going and beaten the game without too much issue, but it definitely scratched that itch, and I went on to play something else on the Game Boy Advance, which I'll talk about in a different video. Again, it brought me back to a kind of a more simpler time, but it did bring me back to a time in the Pokemon card game where they kind of got it wrong, right? Like to this day, they still item cards are very important. This is a game that is a lot faster sometimes than Magic the Gathering, in my experience, anyway. And it seems like the rules, especially back then, didn't reward evolving Pokemon, which is like the entire point of the game, and made stuff like items too useful. I think if I were going to design like a format of the Pokemon card game, which why would you? Because this is a game for children. But I would probably want to limit the amount of item cards you could use. I don't know if 16 is the number. I don't know if 20 is the number, but it just feels more fun to actually use all those six prize slots and actually have different Pokemon fight against each other and have the game last for a while. So I think I would design it that way. But I was talking about this card game. It's fun. I wish they did more of these. It sounds like there was one more that came out in Japan, but man, a EX era Pokemon trading card game video game would be my jam, because that was my jam in real life, and apparently it was a lot of people's jam. So they'll never do it, but man, wouldn't that be a fun little nostalgic nugget to give to the fans?